Video games and opera, they don't really seem to mix. One is a stage production originating from the late 16th century. It's remained relatively unchanged for a century, if not more, whereas the other is a screen-based medium that is no more than 60 years old. And guess which one is which? So, say for example you're a massive fan of a game and appreciated the opera art form, what would you do? A young man from Portugal is making a full-scale 3-hour opera for the game, of course. Will it work? Does it have a chance to succeed? Can you even bring two things so culturally different from each other together? We'll be following the difficulties, triumphs and dreams of the people working on this unique and ambitious project and find out what lies in store for this simple stage production that could revitalise an old art form with new blood. Opera. Do people today even know much about opera? Well, can they name any?
I've never really been a fan of opera.
It's not really my sort of music to listen to, really. I prefer sort of rap.
That's okay. I wouldn't listen to it for myself.
I don't really know. I don't really listen to it, to be fair.
An arguably dying art form, there's no shame in admitting that opera doesn't hold the popularity it once had. What about video games, though?
Oh yeah, definitely. Big fan
I like
of
video games.
I like video games, yeah. That's my thing.
I love them.
Yeah.
They're
like,
great.
almost
I mean,
every day.
you get addicted to them.
Yeah.
But
I play them a lot, actually.
Far more popular. Music and video games aren't strangers to each other. Games often now have fully orchestrated scores, and games such as SingStar and Guitar Hero are based solely on music. Video game music is no stranger to being played live either. With events such as Video Games Live, there's clearly an audience for what at first would appear to be a niche market. But opera? The closest thing the world has had to an opera based on a game, however, so far has been a musical based on a game about being an attorney called Phoenix Wright. Strange, but it worked and it was only performed in Japan. Now, one of the oldest and most iconic series in the history of games, The Legend of Zelda, has been picked by a fan to be the subject of his work, to be turned into an opera. This isn't the first time Zelda's being performed live. In fact, it has its own symphony orchestra which tours around the world called Symphony of the Goddess. The iconic Zelda theme, probably pretty familiar to you if you've played any of the games. If not, it's some pretty snazzy music. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask was released in the year 2000. Pretty different from most Zeldas, it features a demon trying to crash the moon into the world in 3 days. You play as Link, turning back time and trying to save the land of Termina from impending doom. A classic story of a hero against insurmountable odds.
For Frodo. For Azeroth!
Now, how do you put such an epic tale onto the stage in the form of an opera? First off, you need a dedicated and talented team of fans and musicians.
My name is Miguel Bulteau. I'm Portuguese. I was born in Portugal. I grew up in Portugal. I'm still in Portugal. Apparently, I've always had an interest in music. Listening, the earliest memory I have is being in the garden and listening to a huge speaker in the garden was playing Handel's Hallelujah Choir, Messiah, or whatever it was.
My name is Miguel Jesus. I'm Portuguese. I'm 31 years old. I studied music for 10 years now. I studied classical guitar.
I guess he's an Xbox and I'm more Atari.
My name's Liam Greenough. I'm from Melbourne. I'm in Australia. I'm 23 years old and I'm somewhere through a university degree. I'm a musician. I've also dabbled with sound programming. So part of that is getting into the realm of electronica, but also of sequencing with samples like for orchestras. What that led itself to was a lot of reorchestration of video game music, which is what I did as a hobby when I was a lot younger.
Miguel Bulteau, Miguel Jesus, both in Portugal, and Liam Greenough, in Australia, are working to bring together the classics and the contemporary in a marvellous fashion. Bulteau was the one who initially came up with the idea and spearheaded it. So, Bulteau, bringing Majora's Mask to opera, how did you even get the idea?
First of all, Majora's Mask left a huge impression on me. I felt like for the first time, I felt like the characters were alive, you know? I felt like I didn't process that. As an 11-year-old, don't really process that. But as you grow older, you start looking into it and you go like, this is deeper. I felt the depth, but I could not understand it. I could not really describe it. It was the end of 2011, and the Zelda Symphony of the Goddesses was touring. And I was like, if they can do that, and that started as an independent project, I mean, why can't we go a step further and, you know, stage an opera? I mean, why can't we just make this, you know, instead of just a little concert with some projected stuff, you know, make it into something heavy with substance, like an event? Because if this is staged, I'll assure you, you won't be leaving the theater for at least 4 hours. I remember vaguely having an idea to stage something related to Majora's Mask when I was in my teens. I have no idea when. I just can tell you that I have the vague sensation that I had already thought of it. When I was little, I thought I was going to be the first to make orchestras play video game music. And when I heard of video games live, I was devastated. I thought, damn it, I am no longer the first one to do that. Of course, that was inevitable because I was too ignorant to understand that I'm not the only musician in the world who's played video games. That was obviously gonna happen.
Whilst talking to fans of Zelda, an interesting point was raised.
But I just remember Link is a silent protagonist, so I honestly don't see how it could work really well, but I'd also be worried how it would work.
The protagonist being silent in an opera. Please explain.
With Majora, what Bulteau decided early, I think he wanted to include as much of the original's lore as possible. He knew that would be impossible. Furthermore, he knew that there were certain specific and critical elements to the way the game presented events that would be impractical or insensible in the operatic medium. The biggest example of that is the fact that we don't have Link in the opera. Link is cut because he's just not an operatic part. It does not do to have a silent protagonist in opera.
Bulteau then expanded on this further.
The player is Link, therefore the audience in an opera is what the player would be in a video game. So the audience is Link. What does that mean? That means nothing. It means that Link is not there.
This doesn't mean, however, that we won't have a protagonist in the opera. Instead, we'll be following the story of Cafe, another character from the game, to, in Bulteau's words, create a more human story that runs parallel to that of the magic with the gods and the giants and such.
I dig my hole, you build a wall.
With Liam working on the libretto and Jesus working on the mixing, this leaves one of the most important building blocks of an opera to Bulteau himself, the music. Because he wants to keep the opera close to the source material of the game but still create new pieces and keep it fresh, he's using a technique called organic development.
Organic development is actually a term that I accidentally coined because I thought that was the name. It's not the name. It has no name. I had a compositional analysis teacher who called it organics. And apparently the organics is a thing, but apparently that's restricted to Portuguese, orgânica, because I could never see it anywhere else in English, in the English language. Whatever it is, named or not named, it exists. You take a melody, or anything you want, you take a piece of music, and you start playing with it. It's literally just playing with it. You can have the exact same melody, with the exact same thing, with slight adjustments to adapt to a context. So instead of adding something completely new, you grab something that is related to that, or you just use what you have, and you grow with it. The Stockpot Tree is another example. You start with the house theme, perfectly cloned, the exact same thing.
In the post box. No, I mean in the post box where.
Then it speeds up. That's not very hard to understand, you know. You have some ornaments on it instead of it being single notes. You have some ornaments on them.
I must know where this came from. I'm afraid my lips are numb. Please tell me. What's your secrecy? I've been waiting weeks.
And then suddenly, Andrew's mother comes in, and it feels like it's something different, but it's not. There was a key change, but I just changed the rhythm. Instead of it being, it's. but the notes are the same.
Yes, mother. Why are you so right? It's rather complicated now. I have to go and finish my
So, for example, in the opera, there's a moment where a race called the Deku do battle against an ancient god called Odolwa. At the beginning of the battle, Odolwa is the dominant force, but towards the end, the Deku start to win. This can be signified through the music as well, through the use of organic development. Though clearly that isn't the full piece, it's obvious to tell that towards the beginning there was one clear dominant force. In the middle, there was more of a struggle between the two different themes colliding, and then towards the end the Deku theme began winning out. Originally, the opera was only planned to take 1 year to write, but for the past 4 years, with the help of friends, these three have been practically solely devoted to writing and refining it and not much else.
This project has been going for so long. Part of the job is writing the opera, and the other part is performing it. But this is taking so long that it feels like it's a permanent work. It feels like it's going to last forever. The problem of this is that me, Miguel, and Liam are perfectionists, but the problem is not attaining perfection. I think perfection is attainable. The problem is defining what perfection is.
It's anguishing. It's tiresome. It's a pressure that never leaves you. At least I don't shut off. It's very tiresome. It's 4 years of the exact same thing, of the anxiety of wanting something done and not being able to do it at the pace you want, because the people you are with are already being so awesome at helping you the way they are. If you're gonna, I'm not a slave driver. I can't just grab people and tell them do this. No, it's every help I get is amazing. It's great. It's something I wouldn't expect. But it's a game of the rationalized humility that you obviously need to have, and the impatience of why isn't this done?
Despite the amount of time spent on it, there is always a fear that it won't go on stage or ever be funded. Mainly, this fear exists because The Legend of Zelda is owned by Nintendo. The future of the opera after it is written is dependent entirely on whether or not Nintendo will allow for it to be made a reality.
I'm really scared that it won't go on stage because I've put in many hours into this, and I just think music only happens when it happens on stage.
Regardless of what happens, however, there is no doubt that what they are doing will bring fresh blood to a beautiful art.
Perhaps, yes, we will create a new wave of operatic tradition.
I mean, I just want this to go on stage, really.
The end result, I think, has proved to be more than worth it.
It'll be done when it's good.